stardust and royal duties. The light of 3 moons filtered through the crystal dome above High Priestess Lyra's chambers, casting fractured rainbows across her ceremonial robes. She stood motionless as her handmaidens attached the final pieces of her regalia, a living crown of luminescent flora that responded to her thoughts and emotions. Each bloom represented a constellation under the protection of the Celestial Empire, and as their high priestess, Lyra bore their collective weight upon her brow. "The council awaits, your radiance," said Thora, her most trusted attendant. The older woman's skin shimmered with the traditional markings of the royal household, constellations meticulously tattooed across her azure complexion. Lyra nodded, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of her headdress. Another day of nodding and smiling while old men argue about star charts and territorial disputes. Thora's eyes widened at the blasphemy, but her lips curved into a subtle smile. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years through such meetings. And I shall endure another, Lyra sighed, her slender fingers adjusting the final folds of her robe. The fabric rippled like liquid starlight, engineered to mimic the cosmic phenomena her people worshipped and commanded. The council chamber loomed vast and imposing, carved from a single asteroid that had fallen to their world millennia ago. 12 ancient counselors waited in tiered seats that surrounded a central platform where Lyra would stand. Each counselor represented a major constellation system within the Empire, their faces partially obscured by ceremonial masks that glowed with the light of their respective star clusters. "High Priestess," intoned Grand Counselor Vega, his voice resonating through the chamber, "the diplomatic vessel from Earth has been denied passage through the Orion Gateway. Their ambassador sends formal protest." Lyra stepped onto the platform, feeling the familiar pulse of energy that connected her to the celestial map hovering above. Her crown responded immediately, the blooms brightening to signal her engagement with the cosmic interface. "On what grounds was passage denied?" she asked, knowing full well that the council had been looking for excuses to limit human expansion. "Inadequate offerings," replied Counselor Rigel, her voice sharp with disdain. "The humans continue to underestimate the cost of traversing sacred pathways. They offer technology when we seek reverence." Lyra suppressed a sigh. The ancient traditions demanded respect that most species struggled to comprehend, but the humans had been particularly resistant to cosmic etiquette. Their pragmatic approach to space travel clashed violently with the Empire's mystical governance. "Perhaps," Lyra suggested carefully, "we might consider an exchange of knowledge rather than traditional offerings. The humans have made remarkable advances in—" "Blasphemy," interrupted Counselor Altair, the eldest of the group. "Would you have us trade our celestial wisdom for their mechanical trinkets? The paths between stars are sacred, not mere highways for commerce." The debate continued for hours, voices rising and falling like waves against the shores of reason. Lyra maintained her composure, offering diplomatic compromises that were systematically rejected. By the session's end, relations with Earth remained strained, and her crown had dimmed significantly, reflecting her waning energy. As twilight painted the sky in shades of violet and indigo, Lyra escaped to her private sanctuary, a secluded garden where rare stellaris flowers bloomed only under starlight. Here, away from watchful eyes, she could remove her crown and simply exist without the weight of an empire on her shoulders. The peace was shattered by a piercing whistle that cut through the night air. Lyra looked up to see a ball of fire streaking across the sky, a ship in distress, its trajectory erratic and dangerous. It disappeared behind the distant mountains, and seconds later, a distant boom echoed across the valley. Protocol demanded she alert the Imperial Guard immediately. Any unauthorized landing was considered an invasion, particularly in the current climate of tension with various species. Instead, Lyra found herself summoning her personal transport sphere, a decision that would alter the course of constellations. The crash site glowed with residual heat when she arrived. The vessel was unlike the elegant ships of the Empire, bulky, functional, and now partially embedded in the sacred soil of her world. Warning symbols flashed across its hull in a language she recognized from her diplomatic studies, Earth Standard. Approaching cautiously, Lyra activated her personal shield, not out of fear but necessity. The atmosphere of her world was toxic to most species without protection. A hatch on the side of the ship groaned open, releasing a plume of smoke. A figure stumbled out, clad in a damaged environment suit. The human removed his helmet, revealing features that Lyra found strangely compelling: skin darkened by distant suns, eyes the color of nebulae, and hair cropped close to his skull. He collapsed to his knees, clearly struggling with the atmosphere despite his suit's attempts to compensate. Without hesitation, Lyra extended her shield to encompass him, creating a bubble of breathable air. The human gasped, drawing in deep breaths before looking up at her with undisguised wonder. "Either I'm hallucinating," he said in a rough voice, "or you're the most beautiful alien I've ever crashed in front of." "You're on sanctified ground," Lyra replied, surprised to find herself speaking in Earth standard. "By law, I should have you executed immediately." The human managed a lopsided smile despite his condition. "I'm Damien Orion, pilot for the Earth Diplomatic Corps. My navigation system went haywire near your atmosphere. I was part of the delegation that was supposed to meet with your council." "You're very far from your intended destination," Lyra observed, helping him to his feet. "I am Lyra, High Priestess of the Celestial Empire." Damien's eyes widened in recognition. "The High Priestess? I was briefed about you. They said you're basically the voice of your gods." "We have no gods," Lyra corrected him. "We have the stars, and I am their interpreter." She glanced back toward the distant spires of the capital. "And if my people find you here, diplomat or not, they will declare it an act of war. So why haven't you called your guards?" Damien asked, leaning against his ship for support. Lyra paused, unsure of the answer herself. "Perhaps the stars have other plans for you." Over the next 3 cycles of the primary moon, Lyra visited the crash site in secret. She brought Damien supplies and helped him repair his communications array, though they both knew that even if he could contact his delegation, they had already departed after the council's rejection. "Your people see the universe so differently," Damien remarked one evening as they sat beneath the twin moons. He was attempting to repair a circuit board with tools that seemed primitive to Lyra. "To us, stars are navigation points, resources, scientific opportunities. To you, they're alive." "They are," Lyra insisted, her fingers tracing constellations in the air between them. "Each has a voice, a purpose, a story. My ancestors learned to listen millennia ago, and that knowledge built our empire." Damien smiled, setting down his tools. "On Earth, we have myths about stars too. Some believe they're the souls of the departed, watching over us. Perhaps your ancestors understood more than your scientists give them credit for," Lyra replied, surprised at how comfortable she felt in his presence. With Damien, she wasn't High Priestess, she was simply Lyra, a woman fascinated by different perspectives. As days passed, Lyra found herself sharing more about her world, the politics, the traditions, the growing rigidity of a system that had once been fluid as starlight. In turn, Damien told her of Earth's struggles and triumphs, their resilience in the face of cosmic indifference, their determination to carve out a place among the stars despite being unwelcome in many corners of the galaxy. "Your council thinks we're reckless," Damien said as he worked on his ship's engines. "Maybe we are. But we've had to be. No one handed us the stars on a platter or taught us how to navigate celestial pathways. We had to figure it out ourselves, one explosion at a time." Lyra laughed, a sound that had become increasingly rare in her official life. "Your species' approach to failure is fascinating. You celebrate it as a step toward success. Better than executing the person who fails," Damien pointed out with a raised eyebrow. Their conversations grew deeper, their moments together longer. Lyra began neglecting certain ceremonial duties, claiming illness when she simply wanted to spend time at the crash site. Her crown, attuned to her emotions, became increasingly difficult to control, the blooms sometimes flaring with colors that revealed feelings she dared not name. On the 15th night, as Lyra approached the hidden valley, she found Damien standing outside his ship, a look of triumph on his face. "I fixed it," he announced. The comms are working, and I've received coordinates for a rendezvous point with an Earth vessel. Lyra felt a strange hollowness spread through her chest. That's wonderful news. When will you depart? Tomorrow, at dusk. He hesitated, studying her face. Come with me. The words hung between them like suspended stardust. That's impossible, Lyra whispered, though something deep within her resonated with the suggestion. I am bound to this world, to my people. Are you? Damien stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, a gesture forbidden by every protocol of her position. Or are you bound to traditions that no longer serve the stars they claim to honor? As their fingers touched, Lyra's crown, which she had brought with her but not worn, erupted in a cascade of light, the blooms pulsing with colors never before seen in the history of the Empire. The stars, it seemed, had their own ideas about destiny. Constellations of rebellion. The three moons aligned in a rare celestial event as Damien's ship hummed to life, its engines casting an ethereal glow across the secluded valley. Lyra stood at the edge of the landing site, her official robes exchanged for simpler attire, a small bag containing her few personal possessions clutched in trembling hands. Her crown, the symbol of her authority and connection to the stars, lay carefully wrapped in silk at the bottom of her bag. Second thoughts? Damien asked softly, emerging from the ship's hatch. His environment suit had been patched with materials from her world, creating an unusual fusion of technologies that seemed fitting for their situation. 1,000, Lyra admitted, her gaze drawn to the distant spires of the capital city where alarms had begun to sound. But none strong enough to keep me here. The decision had crystallized during the night as she'd lain awake in her chambers, staring at the stars through her crystal dome. For centuries, high priestesses had claimed to interpret the will of the cosmos, but Lyra had begun to suspect that tradition had calcified their understanding. The stars spoke of change, of movement, of new connections, not the rigid isolation that the council insisted upon. They've discovered you're missing, Damien observed, nodding toward the city where lights were beginning to sweep outward in search patterns. Sooner than I expected. Lyra took a deep breath, then stepped forward. We should hurry. As they boarded the ship, a deafening roar split the night sky. 3 Imperial vessels descended toward the valley, their hulls gleaming with the ceremonial markings of the Royal Guard. They're tracking your crown, Damien realized, hastily sealing the hatch. It's connected to their systems, isn't it? Lyra nodded grimly, retrieving the wrapped crown from her bag. Every bloom pulsed with urgent light, like a heartbeat growing increasingly erratic. The connection works both ways. As long as I have this, they can find us anywhere in the galaxy. Then we leave it behind, Damien suggested, already plotting an evasive course through the ship's navigation system. It's not that simple. Lyra unwrapped the delicate structure, the living flora responding to her touch with cascades of color. This crown doesn't just track me, it's biologically bonded to my consciousness. If it's destroyed. She left the consequence unspoken. Understanding dawned in Damien's eyes. Then we need to mask the signal somehow. The ship lurched as the first energy pulses from the Imperial vessel struck nearby, deliberately missing but serving as a warning. Through the viewscreen, Lyra could see Grand Counselor Vega standing atop the lead vessel, his ceremonial mask amplifying his voice to supernatural levels. High Priestess Lyra. By the ancient laws of the Celestial Empire, you are commanded to return to your sacred duties. The human interloper will be granted mercy if you comply immediately. He's lying, Lyra said quietly. The council was already planning to make an example of any human found in our territory. Damien's hands flew across the control panel, activating systems and rerouting power. Can you buy us some time? Make them think you're considering. Lyra hesitated, then placed the crown upon her head one final time. The connection surged through her, linking her mind to the collective consciousness of the Empire's celestial network. Through this bond, she could address not just Vega but the entire council simultaneously. Honorable counselors, she projected, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I have embarked on a pilgrimage of celestial interpretation, as is my right under the seventh edict of star communion." She felt their confusion ripple through the connection, followed by outrage. The seventh edict was ancient, almost forgotten, a provision that allowed a high priestess to seek direct communion with distant constellations if she believed the empire had strayed from cosmic harmony. Blasphemy! Vega's response thundered across the valley. The seventh edict requires council approval and ceremonial preparation. Check your ancient texts, Lyra countered, feeling Damien's ship beginning to rise beneath her feet. The edict specifically states that when signs of cosmic disharmony appear, the high priestess may undertake the journey without delay or permission. The dissension among the council members gave them the moments they needed. As the Imperial vessels began to move into an intercept formation, Damien engaged the ship's primary thrusters, sending them rocketing toward the night sky. "That won't hold them for long," Lyra said, removing the crown as they breached the atmosphere. The mental connection stretched thin, then snapped as they accelerated beyond the planet's influence. "Long enough," Damien replied with a grin that belied the danger they faced. "We just need to reach the Scatter Nebula. Earth ships have been mapping safe passages through it for years, but your empire avoids it completely. Because it's considered the graveyard of fallen stars," Lyra explained, gazing out at the vast expanse of space that now surrounded them. Without her crown, she felt strangely unburdened yet disconnected, as though a constant background hum had suddenly ceased. Entering it without proper rituals is forbidden. Damien's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Convenient, then, that we're already breaking all the rules." The ship's sensors detected the Imperial vessels in pursuit as they approached the nebula's edge, a swirling mass of cosmic dust and newborn stars that sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet. As Damien navigated the treacherous currents of stellar winds and gravitational eddies, Lyra felt a strange resonance from her crown, which now lay quiescent in her lap. "The stars here," she whispered, "they're speaking differently." "Different how?" Damien asked, his attention divided between the pursuing ships and the hazardous navigation. "Younger. Less structured." Lyra closed her eyes, letting the unfamiliar patterns wash over her. "My people believe that stars die when their purpose is complete, but these," she gestured toward the brilliant chaos surrounding them. "These stars aren't dead or dying. They're being born, evolving, finding new paths." A warning klaxon shattered her contemplation. One of the Imperial vessels had launched a tethering beam, ancient technology designed to ensnare rogue celestial bodies and, occasionally, fugitive priestesses. "They're trying to lock onto your crown's energy signature," Damien explained, executing a series of evasive maneuvers that sent them plunging deeper into the nebula. "Any way to shut it down completely?" Lyra studied the living construct, its blooms now pulsing weakly in the unfamiliar stellar environment. "Not without severing my connection to it permanently." The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the cockpit. To disconnect from her crown was to renounce her position, her heritage, her very identity among her people. "Your choice," Damien said simply, understanding the magnitude of the decision. "But make it soon." Through the viewscreen, Lyra watched as the nebula thickened around them, cosmic matter swirling in patterns both beautiful and deadly. The Imperial vessels pursued with single-minded determination, their engines straining against natural forces they had been taught to revere rather than challenge. In that moment, clarity struck her like a newborn star. The Empire had stopped listening to the cosmos long ago, replacing genuine communion with rigid tradition. Perhaps her departure wasn't an abandonment of duty but its ultimate fulfillment, to remind her people that the stars were not static monuments but living, changing entities. "I know what to do," she said, raising her crown one last time. Instead of placing it upon her head, she held it toward the heart of the nebula and began to sing, not the ceremonial chants of her official duties but a melody that came from somewhere deeper, more instinctual. The crown responded immediately, its blooms expanding and contracting in rhythm with her voice. Colors cascaded through the living structure, mirroring the swirling patterns of the nebula itself. "What are you doing?" Damien asked, fascination momentarily overriding his concern with their pursuit. Returning it to the stars, Lyra replied between verses of her improvised song. Not destroying it, transforming it. If the crown becomes part of the nebula, its energy will disperse among thousands of stellar nurseries. The Empire can track it all they want, but they'll find only echoes, fragments, reflections. As the song reached its crescendo, Lyra activated the small airlock beside her seat. When the chamber cycled open to the vacuum of space, she placed the crown inside and sealed the inner door. "Goodbye, old friend," she whispered, pressing the release button. The crown drifted into the nebula, immediately caught in the cosmic currents. For a moment, it seemed to pulse with farewell, then it burst into a shower of luminescent spores, each carrying a piece of its essence into the stellar nursery. The spectacle was so beautiful that even Damien momentarily forgot their peril, his hands stilling on the controls. The Imperial vessels faltered, their tracking systems suddenly receiving thousands of conflicting signals from across the nebula. Through the view screen, Lyra watched as they attempted to regroup, their formation breaking apart in confusion. "Now's our chance," Damien said, plotting a course through the densest part of the nebula where the Empire's ships wouldn't dare follow. As they accelerated away from their pursuers, Lyra felt a strange lightness spreading through her being. The constant presence at the back of her mind, the collective consciousness of the Empire, had faded to a distant whisper. In its place came a new awareness, the unfiltered voices of stars speaking not through tradition or ritual but directly to her awakened senses. "They'll never stop looking for us," she said, though the thought brought more exhilaration than fear. Damien reached across the console, his fingers entwining with hers, a gesture that would have been unthinkable mere days ago. "Good thing the universe is a big place." Their ship emerged from the nebula into open space, where a small Earth vessel waited at the predetermined rendezvous point. As they approached, Lyra gazed back at the swirling cosmic cloud that had granted them sanctuary. Within its depths, she could see the dispersed essence of her crown, not lost but transformed, becoming part of the very stars she had once interpreted. "What will your people think?" Damien asked as they prepared to dock. "About us, I mean." Lyra smiled, the expression unrestrained by the protocols that had governed her every emotion for so long. "Humans have a reputation for being disruptive. I imagine they'll blame you entirely for corrupting their high priestess." "Fair enough," he laughed. "And what about you? Having second thoughts about trading cosmic royalty for life as a fugitive?" She considered the question seriously, her gaze moving from the nebula to the stars beyond, then back to Damien's face, a journey between worlds that mirrored her own transformation. "The stars don't just exist to be interpreted from a distance," she said finally. "They're meant to be explored, challenged, sometimes even defied. My people forgot that long ago." She squeezed his hand. "I'd rather live among the stars than simply speak for them." As their ship docked with the Earth vessel, Lyra felt the distinct impression that the cosmos itself was watching, not in judgment but in witness to something rare and precious. A high priestess who had abandoned her crown not for power or fear, but for the most ancient force in any galaxy, love. And somewhere in the great expanse of space, newborn stars pulsed with the story of Lyra and Damien, a tale that would eventually find its way back to the Celestial Empire, carried by the very cosmic currents the Council had claimed to control. The stars, after all, remember everything, especially those who dare to forge new constellations.